Today is September 5th, 2023. My name's Melissa Ackerman, and I will be interviewing Kenny Goldberg as part of the JCC Past President project. How are you today, Kenny?
I'm great, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
Great. What was the JCC's official name during your tenure?
It was the JCC. It was the Jewish Community Center.
Nobody's name attached to it?
No, that was when I was growing up. The Julia Sheps Community Center was the name. And I remember when we lived across the street on Midbury, and we wore our wool baseball uniforms in the middle of the summer across the street. And it was JSCC. So it was JCC before and JCC after. When I was president, It was JCC.
And when did you serve as president?
From 1998 to 2000.
And what was your title during your tenure?
I was president of the board.
Okay, it was before chairman and all the different changes. Who were the various lay leaders during your tenure?
So some of the lay leaders weren't necessarily the heroes that I can talk about separately, but the lay leaders were some of the immediate past presidents that were there, but mainly the leaders were the people that I shared opportunities and chairmanships with on the board, including Melissa Ackerman and Wendy Stanley and Joan Schulman and Irene Radin, and of course my brother Neil Goldberg and my wife Sherry and my sister Jerry Finkelstein had already come through and received Leader of the Year awards, and my friends Mike Hirsch and Alan Feltman and others. So those were the leaders, the movers at the JCC, and of course the presidents that surrounded my presidency, Yannette Hogue and Stuart Prescott, Mike Hirsch, and Toby Gerber, Ron Foxman, and Ann Stern, and all those people we had a camaraderie that was really special in the day.
What was the relationship between the J and the Federation?
It was great. It was almost like we could go from our building, our office, to their office and back, and there was a certain relationship and camaraderie that we had where we knew what our roles were, our responsibilities, and we knew as a beneficiary agency here and as a benefactor of the Federation what we were doing. But for the period that I was involved in the mid to late 90s, all through the 90s actually, through the early 2000s, it was almost, take one cap off, put the other one on.
A lot of the same people were involved in both agencies?
Yes.
How did the Jewish community interact with the secular Dallas community?
So I know that when it was the Julia Sheps Community Center, when I was growing up, that I was told, I think by my parents and other people, that part of that was because the Jewish Community Center had either a connotation or something that some people in the general and secular community found either offensive or just not appropriate. So in those days, there might have been a little bit of controversy. I don't think there was any conflict or adversity. But when I was around, when I was president of the JCC, we got along. I remember that Sherry chaired an event, Community Board Institute, I think, that they brought hundreds, if not thousands, of people in throughout the community and the Jewish and general community that came to the JCC, where we were the host of big community events, and that was almost like just normal, commonplace.
Mm-hmm. What significant local, national, or international events had an effect on your era?
So when I was president, there was a shooting at the Los Angeles JCC, and there were children shot. I think one or two people lost their lives, and we had to come up with a response. So Karen Stern, who was the executive director of the JCC, set up some training for me, some media training, and I went on camera, and I was on 2 or 3 of the channels and came up with a response as to what we're doing to talk about the hatred that's out there about anti-Semitism. So it was a learning experience for me, not only with the media, but in regard to certain types of anti-Semitism, of hate, and it started a pathway of security at the J, and I think maybe throughout the community, that we found really helpful moving forward. So that incident in Los Angeles did have some positive impacts on our community.
I was going to ask you about that. And, who were the prominent supporters of the J during your period?
Well, I had the privilege of serving as president when we burned the mortgage, and we had a big community event in the Zale Auditorium and literally burned the mortgage. And Joni Weinstein was there taking pictures. But the cool thing was, at that time, all the greats, all of my heroes and mentors were still with us, and those were past presidents and just giants in the Jewish community. So I'm going to leave someone out, but Mr. Donsky and Murray Munvis and Henry Cohn and Mickey Rubin. There were just so many. Like I said, I'm going to leave some out. But those were the guys that when I grew up, they were the ones that were raising money to build the new JCC. And of course, Don Schaefer was the president when all that happened, when this building pretty much went up. And Don was a mentor of mine too and a great leader.
Mm-hmm. What changes have you experienced in the Dallas Jewish community?
I think that the changes have been in regard to Dallas itself becoming a more diverse community and geographically being so dispersed. So it's a challenge to the JCC and other Jewish organizations to have one physical location where people need to come, because so many people in the Jewish community are so far away now that it's a challenge to do things. So when I grew up across the street, when my kids grew up, we would have every Sunday, we'd have basketball games and volleyball games for the girls, and our kids were always here, and we'd see all of our friends at the JCC. In fact, most of our adult friends to this day, we met from when our kids were at the preschool at the JCC or playing ball at the JCC. So I think the biggest change is just the challenge of geography and bringing people to a physical location to partake in the wide variety of activities at the JCC.
How has the J changed over the years?
The J's been pretty much a constant in my life, 70 years. It's always been the center of the Jewish community. It's always been a place for me and my kids and grandkids to come. All of our kids and grandkids have been through the preschool. We still have 2 here, and the other 8 have moved on to some of the best schools in the community. So I don't know how it's changed. People come and go. Leadership, professional, and lay people come and go, but we've maintained. And look, I heard stories from my parents of when the JCC was on Pocahontas Street in South Dallas, and some of the past presidents a little before me remember those days. But I don't see a lot of change. The services and the programming are constant. Our mission's all about serving the Jewish community and have a gathering central location for us to have cultural and social and health and fitness activities and to provide a safe haven for Jews throughout the community.
Were your parents native Dallasites?
Yeah, so Dad was born here. Mom was born in Corsicana, but basically grew up in Fort Worth and Dallas. So they were here, and Jerry, Neil, and I were always here, and they set the tone for us to be active in the Jewish community.
Were they active in different,
yeah,
in
they
the
were
JCC?
active. They weren't always the leaders of organizations, but Dad was Man of the Year in 1964. And I think Mom worked here at one time, so they were always active. The JCC and Sheriff Thistle, to some degree, were kind of at the forefront. But we used to go to Purim Carnivals at Golden Acres, and we knew what the other agencies were, but we were mostly involved at the JCC.
In sporting and all kinds of sports and different activities?
Melissa, I've played in sporting events, if I count the 20s, although I'm not sure what I've done other than work out. So starting in the late 50s, when I was about 6 years old, I'm 70 years old, and I think I participated in activities at the JCC for at least 8 decades.
Wow. And your family is involved, your kids and grandkids
Yeah,
participate?
Daughter Jenny is on the board of directors, and our kids are all supportive and participants, and hopefully their kids will be too. We have granddaughters in gymnastics. I mentioned the kids at the preschool. So yeah, it's a Goldberg legacy that 1, 2, 3, at least 4 generations, and frankly my grandparents lived in Dallas too, so probably 5 generations of Goldberg history, well over 100 years of history here.
That's wonderful. Back to your tenure, who were some of the key staff during your tenure? You mentioned Karen Stern. Were there any others?
Karen was the executive director, and we worked really well together. I remember one time to try to create a little camaraderie between myself and Karen when I first became president. I took her out to the Clumping Club to play golf, and I was never a good golfer. I can think of some other words, but I'll leave it at not good. But poor Karen Stern, she swung a club, and I was even frustrated. So I tried things, but Joni Weinstein was a wonderful professional, and Laura Seymour and Judy Cohn and Elaine Schrager, and I'm going to forget people. Paul Thompson was a really good health and fitness director. And going back further, Bob Weiss was executive director, I think, before Karen, and so many names and faces are kind of flashing before me, but I always got along great with the professionals, and I respected them for their commitment to the Jewish community.
In relation to your time at the JCC, of what are you most proud?
Well, I think certainly burning the mortgage while I was president, but I have to say that in 2005, when Yannette Hogue and I chaired the Maccabi Games, the first Maccabi Games ever in Dallas, it was so special because we brought hundreds of people together. I'm not talking about the 1,000 or 1,500 kids. I'm talking about the 2 years before the event, traveling to Austin and St. Louis to see other Maccabi Games a year or 2 before, and I think it was a very special time for the Dallas Jewish community. It wasn't all about the JCC. We reached out to so many people that volunteered in so many ways, and Melissa, I know you were involved in that, and so many people were, but that's always a very special time.
And how many days? It's a week-long series of programs for teenagers?
Yeah, it was, it went like that. It was 4 or 5 days, but the planning was a couple of years, and to bring over 1,000 Jewish kids to Dallas in the middle of the summer with the heat. We had spectacular events. We had Mark Cuban, who was a pretty new owner of the Mavericks, out at the rodeo in Mesquite to kick off the events, and I think we ended it at the Cowboy Stadium in Arlington, or maybe it was the AAC in downtown, but we were all over the community, and we had hundreds of people that not only sponsored but hosted kids in their houses, which was remarkable.
Mm-hmm. Are there other programs that you're especially proud of?
Well, I chaired a couple of events with Irene Radin. We had family party night on Saturday nights where we had fun and games nights and brought a lot of people in, and we hosted the Israel Independence Day. One of the things I'm most proud of is when I was a vice president, or when I was president, we started a program with the congregations in the community, and we had partnerships where we would give young people, I think it was under 30 or 35 each, a free year of membership at the congregation in the JCC. And I think it was called Kesher. Is that community? Whatever it was. But I think it may still be going on today. So that's something that I think has brought a lot of young people into the fold, gotten them affiliated in the Jewish community. And some of those people, I assume, are leaders in our Jewish community now.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the initiatives to increase interest and membership at the J? You mentioned coordinating with the synagogues. Were there any other programs that you can remember that were especially important?
I think that with some of the professionals that I mentioned, they were also good at what they did, that by putting on the best programs and our best foot forward in the community, that anybody we could get into the building to see what we're doing in cultural, religious, social, health and fitness activities, it was just a natural in those days. And in those days, most people lived a lot closer to the JCC than most of the Jewish community does now. So it was a lot more natural, but those were the things. It was kind of word of mouth. We did a really good job at a lot of things, and those things reflected in increased membership.
And are there any special experiences or stories during your tenure you'd like to share?
Oh boy, any special experiences? Well, so I was keeping score, if you have a couple of minutes.
Got plenty of time.
When I was about 12 years old, I was in the gym, the Donsky gym, and there was an all-star basketball game, the Dallas teenagers and the Houston teenagers, and some of my heroes were playing for the Dallas team, and I was keeping the clock. And in those days, we had a clock without digital numbers, but it had a dial that went around like this. You know, every minute it would go all the way around. But at halftime, between the quarters, before the game, you could push a button and it would go, instead of like this, it would go really fast. So our team had a couple of guys that fouled out, and they came up to me during one of the timeouts, and they said, Goldberg, when the ball's down there and nobody's looking at the clock, we only have one clock on one wall, run it fast, run time, because we're not going to make it through the end of the game. So I did it once, and I did it twice, and the third time I did it, one of the parents of one of the Houston players started jumping up and down and yelling and screaming, and I started crying, and Hank Bodner, who was the health and fitness director at the time, came and grabbed me by the arm, yanked me out of the gym, got me out in the hallway. He said, Goldberg, do you know what you're doing? I said, I was trying to help us, Mr. Bodner. He said, you know what, Goldberg? You did a great job, and it was a patriotic act that you did, and he slapped $5 down in my hand and told me I was okay and told me to stop crying.
Funny story.
That's the best I have.
That's great. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, the JCC, for our family, and I'm sure for most of the other past chairs and presidents, it has been a guiding light, shining star, and impacted my life and our lives like probably no other agency in the community, Jewish or non-Jewish. And I will always be grateful for the opportunity to participate, to lead, to be a team player at the JCC, and hopefully leave a legacy for generations to come.
Thank you for all you've done for the JCC and
Thanks,
the community.
Melissa.
Enjoyed it.
Pleasure.